welcome to Short Sisters Motherlyhood Advice, Not Over Your Head. Ellen's husband thought of that. I am Cathy, and this is my co-host, Ellen.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Yes, it's been a minute since we've recorded a podcast, and we were just talking a moment ago. We've lost track on what episode we are on.
Yep, I don't know.
We're like, is it 5? Is it 6?
It's been a minute.
What I've decided to do to make it easy for us is we're just going to have like titles of our episode instead of episode 1, episode 2, just because I don't remember what episode we're on. So
yeah, it's been a minute since we've been able to record. So we've had the holidays.
And sickness over here.
Yes. Cathy has littles.
Mm-hmm.
So I do remember how that was. And once one child gets sick, it's just a train wreck after that. Nope. But the baby's feeling better, though.
Yes,
yeah.
Thankfully.
I finally got her to smile at me today.
Yeah. Yeah, she's not smiled in a bit.
Yeah,
she's back to smiling.
Yeah.
So this podcast episode, it's going to be one on testimonies.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who are listening, it's really like our pre-release, just because I thought that it would be smart for y'all to know who we are.
Yep.
Like how we came to know Christ and what we do and what he's doing in our lives now. That way you could decide if like, hey, these ladies sound interesting. I want to listen to their story.
Yeah.
So this is the episode on our testimonies, and I'm very excited about that. So we're going to start with Ellen. So Ellen, tell us what you were like before Christ.
Okay. So I grew up in a home where we went to church. Mom was very adamant about us going to church. My dad was Catholic, and my mom was Baptist when they got married. And one of the things that my mom told my dad was it was very, very important for her that our family go to church on a regular basis. So I grew up in church, grew up in Southern Baptist Church. It's one of, I guess you could probably say it's a big church, but it's not a mega church here in Houston. And it's still around. And I grew up there, going to Sunday school. I heard the word every Sunday. I sat in service and heard the pastor preach the word, but I just never understood what it meant to have Christ in your life. And so I get to high school. My mom and dad were also very adamant about my brother and I going to private school, and we went to a private Christian school. We've always been to a private Christian school, and I got to high school, and I meet this guy, and we end up dating, and who is now my husband now. But we started dating, and we would just talk on the phone. I don't know if when you and Jason were dating, if you guys would talk on the phone for hours. We talked on the phone for hours, and we didn't have cell phones back then. I had my own. Okay, I'm dating myself again because I am on the side of motherhood where my kids have left the nest. Technically, they're all adults, and Cathy's still a mother with littles. Yeah. So, going back, I'm dating myself. I had my own phone line in my room, and Chad and I would talk on the phone for hours about just everything. And I remember his mother, because my mother-in-law loves to read, and my mother-in-law was reading the book, This Present Darkness. And it looked like an interesting book, and I asked her about it, and then she was telling me about the book, about how it was basically about spiritual warfare. But, I mean, and she said, I'll let you borrow it whenever you want to. And I said, sure. So I started reading it, and it was a very deep book. Like, I did not understand what spiritual warfare was. And what I was reading, it was to the point where I didn't understand it, and it was almost scary to me because, what is spiritual warfare? I didn't realize that as a Christian, you dealt with these things. So I started asking, my boyfriend, who was now my husband, hey, I'm reading the book that your mom gave me, and I don't understand this book. Can you explain it to me? And so he went into more detail about it, and it kind of scared me a little bit because it really made me think about, okay, I've been going to church all my life. I've been hearing the word, but do I understand the word? And then Chad was very blunt with me, and he said, so can I ask you a personal question? And I said, sure. What question you want to ask me? He said, do you know whether or not you're a Christian or not? And I was baffled by the question, and I couldn't answer it. And I told him, I said, I don't know. I don't remember a point in time where I asked Christ into my life and into my heart. I don't remember that moment. So I don't know. I really don't know. And so he began to share the gospel with me. And when he was done sharing, he said, do you have any other questions? And I said, no. And he said, you're kind of quiet. Why don't you get off the phone with me? Why don't you think about it? Call me back if you have questions. So I was in my room, and I just was like, and, Chad had told me, he goes, have a conversation with God. Just open up with him and just tell him how you're unsure, And so I remember praying on my bed going, God, I don't know if I have a personal relationship with you. I really want to have a personal relationship with you. I really want to grow with you. I want to be able to pray with you and have conversations with you and read the word about you. So I really want you to come into my life and into my heart, and I want you to be part of my life. And so I remember when I prayed that prayer, I started crying. I felt that peace. I called Chad. I was crying, and I said, I just accepted Christ. And he was very excited. And then he said, you know what? You need to tell your mother. So I remember I left my room. I told my mom, and she was so happy, so excited. I remember she cried with me because she was so excited. But also what led me to Christ, not only my husband, but the way my mother lived her life. I mean, I could see in her that church was very important. I can see in her, like, I remember when I was a little girl, my mom would tell me Bible stories because she would always tell me stories before bedtime. And she would tell me so many Bible stories. She would read Bible stories. I would see her reading her Bible, even to the day where my mom, the day that she passed away, she did her devotional. She read her Bible. She was singing praises that morning before she passed away that morning. And at the time, my dad did not have a personal relationship with Christ. Like, he was, hey, I'll go to church with you because that's what you want me to do. And he went through the motions, but I didn't know if he had that personal relationship. But it was until after my mom passed away that I saw the change. My dad and I actually have conversations because he'll come to the house and be like, well, I read through Revelation again, and I don't understand that book. And I was like, Daddy, I've read through Revelations, and I don't understand that book. So he comes over and he asks questions about the book. But my mom's life and the way she lived it, and how my husband, told me about Christ is what led me to Christ.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, it's a cool feeling to tell everybody, including my own children, when they asked how I became a Christian, was, well, your dad actually led me to Christ. My husband actually led me to Christ. And
that is so cool.
That just opens up that conversation to people. And I just love it.
It's cool too, because when you think about the many passages in the New Testament on the husband loving his wife,
how Chad
gets to how part of his story is
Yeah.
to tell people by God's grace, I was able to lead my wife really to knowing Christ.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I love that story.
Okay. So how old were you?
I want to say I was 17.
Okay.
I actually didn't get baptized until I was in college.
Okay.
I came home and I went to church, my home church, and our pastor called up an invitation and said, if you have questions about Christ, you want to join our church, or you want to get baptized, come on down. And that was the scariest thing, was to walk down that church aisle and tell my pastor, I want to get baptized. I do have a personal relationship with God, but I want to make it complete. And then that we had 2 services. So that same Sunday, I got baptized.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I got baptized at the 11 o'clock service.
That's cool.
And it was really cool.
That's
It was really cool. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things I like to ask people when I ask them how Christ changed them and how they came to know the Lord is, okay, so now that you've known Christ and you've been walking with Christ for what you say you were 17 and you're...
Yeah, let's see. 30 years. I'm 47.
So you've been walking closely with the Lord for 30 years now. So can you help the viewers and us know and understand how in those 30 years, how the Lord was sanctifying you, how you were growing in your faith? Or maybe even there might have been seasons where you were just like stagnant. You know what I mean? Like nothing's happening. So,
yeah. Oh my goodness.
Tell us the after. Tell us what happened after and what he's doing now.
Yeah. So after, receiving Christ and getting baptized, it wasn't long after, that was when I went to college, probably about a year and a half later, that's when Chad and I got married. And so church was a big part of our life. When we moved to Phoenix, we joined a church there, and we quickly became part of the Sunday school class. We even stepped in serving. There were times where I didn't feel like I was close with God. There were periods where I didn't do devotionals. I didn't open my Bible unless I was at church. And I think those were the hardest times that I had. When we first got married, we struggled. And then we even went through a little bit of a struggle of getting pregnant with Ashlyn. And so those hard times, I felt like now that when I look at how my relationship with Christ has been, I didn't necessarily have that relationship that I probably should have had until probably recently, goodness, maybe the last 15 years until now. I would pray for my kids on a regular basis. I would pray with my kids. I always had in the back of my mind, okay, Mom always showed me what it was like to be Christ-like. I need to show this to my children. And I always tried to emulate that. And I always tried to instill in them that we're going to church on Sunday. This is not an option. But I struggled.
Yeah.
I really struggled. And I truly think that I struggled because there were times where I don't think that I had somebody else, an accountability partner, to help me with that. And so I know when we struggled, when we went through the hard times, because we've been through a lot of hard times, that was when I called out to God. God, help me get through these things. But then when we were okay, I didn't really go through that. And to really grow in your relationship with anybody, but even like with Christ, is that you have to spend and take that time being in your Bible, being in the Word, doing devotionals, attending church, being with other believers that believe the same thing that you do. And I think for me is having an accountability partner. You know, I have always struggled to have my personal relationship with Christ. I know that I have asked him into my life, but there were times where it was almost non-existent in my life. Now, I have learned through the years getting older that I've learned how to grow in Christ. I've learned that through serving in a church and showing my love of Christ to other people, you know, I am in the moment right now where I am trying to be more bold in showing other people Christ, where I'm a very reserved person. And so sharing my testimony with other people is not easy. I've had the opportunity to do it a couple of times. And right now I'm working on having a closer friendship relationship with Christ. I have been getting up early in the morning, having my prayer time, praying for everybody. If I feel like or feel led to pray for certain people, I'll pray again when I have the inkling where I know it's God saying, hey, pray for this person. I have an accountability partner. You've been my accountability partner for a while now. And so that's been helping me a lot. But right now, God's gotten me through those tough times. But I realize that I can't just call on Christ for those tough times. I also have to look at him and praise him for what I have. And it's been tough this last couple of months. Like, you know, we just lost my father-in-law in November. And that's been a really, really hard thing to do is, okay, Lord, we're going through this trying time. And we're going through some other things too that we've been in the midst of healing from. But it's having to rely on Christ. And when those hard times are there, it's like, he's never going to leave me. He's never going to forsake me. He's always there. You know, and I think before, when things were going wrong, I would go, why are you doing this to us, Lord? We don't deserve this. And, you know, that was the wrong attitude to have. So I'm learning, you know, after Christ, I think it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process. It's not, you're going to have those good times where you're really close and then you're just going to fall and not have a conversation with God. And that was me. And so I'm slowly getting back there. And I feel like because I've been doing that, God has been giving me more opportunities to do that. One of the things that I've been really praying to him for was because I've been going through this difficult time, is helping my attitude. Like, why is this happening to me? Is like, how can I be kind to other people? How can I show your love to other people? And so I have to tell this cool testimony. I didn't get to tell you this, but I wanted to share this. So Saturday I was getting my hair done. And this lady comes in and she asks the lady, the owner, she's cutting somebody's hair. She goes, hey, I just need a hair wash. I need a blow dry. Are you going to be able to fit me in? And Lisa, the owner, said, well, there's this lady over there. She's sitting there. She's next. So I'm not going to be able to do it right now. Can you come back later? She goes, yeah, I'll come back later. No problem. And Lisa happened to ask her, the owner, she said, hey, how's your husband doing? And the lady said, my husband's not doing well, Lisa. And so she shared with the owner, she said, yeah, he's in the hospital. He's not doing well. And, you know, I'm just hoping that he's going to get better. And so she left, and the other lady that was sitting there for because she was next, she stood up and she said, you know what? She can take my spot. And Lisa said, no, it's okay. She said she was going to come back. She goes, no, her husband's in the hospital. Let her take my spot. So she ran and got this lady. And the lady said, oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And so the owner finished up with the person that was she was cutting hair for. And this lady sits down and she starts telling the owner how her husband's been in the hospital. He's not doing good. He has a tube down his chest. And, it made me think of my father-in-law. Mm-hmm. And so I was just listening to her tell and I could tell from her voice that she was emotional about it. And so Lisa was washing her hair, and I asked the lady that was cutting my hair, because she's the person that cuts my hair. I took my phone out and I typed on my phone in my notes, how much is it for a wash and a blow dry? And she said, well, I'm not sure, because we all kind of charge different prices. But if it's just her getting her hair washed and like a light blow dry, probably not more than $10 or $15. And I said, tell Lisa I'll pay for this lady's wash and blow dry. And then I said, but I don't want her to know, because I wanted it to be anonymous. And so she told her in Vietnamese that I was paying for, she told the owner that I was going to pay for the wash and the blow dry. And so the lady was done, and she went up to pay, and the owner said, it's taken care of. Somebody's paying for your blow dry and her wash. That's she goes, so cool. What? No, she had her money out, and she said, no, somebody's paying for it. One of our customers is paying for it. And she goes, who? She was crying. So she points me out, and I'm like, I don't want you to point me out. But I got out of my chair, and I was bawling, and I went up to her, and I said, the Lord led me to do this for you. Please let me do it for you. And she just started crying, and she said, oh my God, thank you. You're so sweet. And I said, I'm going to be praying for your husband. What's your husband's name? And so she told me her husband's name was Donald. And she told me, she started to share. She goes, we've been married for 30 years. He's originally from New York. And he's a New Yorker cowboy. She's called him a cowboy. And she said, and he's just not doing well. And he's all that I have. And of course, we're just crying. And but what led me here was that in my head, I kept thinking, okay, I need to see how much it costs. Because if it's too much, I don't know if I can do it. But finally, I was like, if the Lord is leading me to do that, why do I care about cost? Because God's going to provide the cost. Mm-hmm. But I don't tell this story because I want to brag. I'm telling it because this is where my relationship with Christ has been, is that I want to share with other people my God's love, God's kindness, God's light, and just being kind to other people and showing his love and just saying, I'm praying for you. She ended up getting my phone number and saying, what's your name? And so I'm going to text her, and I'm going to ask her how her husband is doing. But, just somebody random that God put in, because I asked for opportunities like this, like God just put in my path and said, all right, here's your opportunity. What you going to do about it? And, it's just stuff like that. So I'm slowly learning to come out of my reservations about being a reserved person, and just, being able to share more with people, which is why we're doing this podcast, mm-hmm. But on to my talking here and stuff. So
that's a cool story. Yeah. I'm so glad you shared it with us.
Yeah, but I had to share that. I meant to tell you about it, but I was like, I'll share it now.
I love hearing those stories so much. Okay, so because our podcast is a lot about motherhood, mm-hmm. I mean, we're going to sprinkle in, we've already talked about this, testimonies and book reviews. I'm very excited about our first book that we read together. I'm excited to review that. Yeah. But because it is mostly about motherhood, mm-hmm. since that's the commonality that we have here. Well, I mean, there's other commonalities, but I wanted to ask, so when you became a mom, mm-hmm. how would you say the Lord used that in your life to help you grow in your faith?
So I realized when I became a mother, because we're all selfish. you know,
Cheers.
cheers with the water. Yeah, we're all selfish people. I mean, that is our nature.
It is. It really is.
And that is our sinful nature, is that we're selfish. But when God blessed me with children, I had to finally realize, hello, Ellen, it is not you. You have these 3 little people that you have to take care of, that you have to think of before yourself. And so I think being a mother and having a relationship with Christ has showed me that I need to be a servant. I need to be able to give to my children before I give to myself. I had those tired days. There were days where I didn't feel good, and there were days where I was just not in a good mood. But I had to be a mother. I had to not think about myself first. I had to think about my children. I wanted my children to be better than I was. It was very important to me that my children be raised up and having a relationship with Christ. In going to church, seeing the importance of going to church, seeing their parents serve in the church, why we served in the church, being a part of it and have them be a part of church, I think was very important to me. So just motherhood has taught me that I can't be selfish. I had other people to think about besides myself. And I had to work through that. That's being a Christian and then having that relationship with Christ and then becoming a mother. I realized that I needed to lead my children to Christ. And so I had to really work on how my attitude was a lot of the time with them. Yeah. That's a great question.
I'm sure I'm going to be repeating a lot of what you said when it comes to my turn. All right. Is there any last thing you want to say or share in regards to what it's like walking with Christ to our listeners before we switch
around? I think having a relationship with Christ is always, you're going to have your ups and downs. But I know that these last couple of months have been very difficult. And it is my faith in God, even those things that you can't see, but having the faith in God that everything, that He's going to get us through those tough storms, and even bless us with them and bring us blessings with that, is what has made me closer to having that relationship with Christ on a daily basis. And I also feel like too is having friendships with people who share those beliefs with you. I know that having accountability with each other, I know like Cathy and I text each other on a regular basis. We'll be, hey friend, how are you? How is it? How are you today? Like, how's it going? And, just having that, I think is just, is really important.
I would
agree. Really important. Yep.
Well, before we switcheroo, so one of the things we like to do is to enjoy a dessert each podcast. And these are actually made by my 10-year-old daughter. She's turning into quite the baker. These are, Ellen, these are double chocolate chip cookies, I believe. They kind of remind me of a brownie with chocolate chips.
Oh, yeah. And I was watching her take them out of the oven, and oh my gosh. Look, the chocolate chip is melting. See?
Yeah, it's very melted. I don't know if you can see over there, listeners, but
oh my goodness.
I approve. All right.
Yeah, tell Evangeline that I approve. I approve too.
All right. So we're done with you. Thank you, Ellen, for sharing your testimony with us and how Christ is working in you. And
don't want to chew in front of them.
I'm like, You like that sound, listeners? You're welcome.
Sorry. Yeah, that is one thing that we will be sharing is desserts every time with the podcast, and then we'll pop in a recipe for you guys. But Cathy's testimony, I love Cathy's testimony. She has shared that with me on multiple occasions, and like just has told me different pieces and bits of her testimony. So I think you're about to be blessed by Cathy's testimony, because I think it's really cool. All right, friend. So tell me how your life was before Christ, as I eat your daughter's cookie, but I'm still listening.
I feel like chocolate's all... Look, sorry, listeners. I'm going to ask Ellen. Is there chocolate everywhere? Okay, cool.
It's all right.
Okay, don't judge.
Yeah.
We know where you live.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Kind of.
So let me say this up front before I talk about my life before Christ. It is very rare that I share my testimony and I don't cry a little bit.
It's all right. We've been crying for the last 3
So
months.
if I tear up and you can't understand me and like I'm blowing snot or something,
wait,
I'm just kidding.
we totally didn't bring any napkins or tissues in here either.
It's
so
fine. I'll be fine. If there's a pause, it's just because I need a moment. I don't think I will. So we'll see. Before Christ. So I grew up in a broken home. Mm-hmm. My biological mom and father never married. Were in fact encouraged not to get married because they both have a mental illness called schizophrenia. Actually, my brothers like to tease me. I was conceived in a psych ward. Oops. So if I'm crazy, I blame
it's just
them.
her red hair. I blame it on the red hair.
Yes, my dad and my mom met in the psych ward. Anyway, so I grew up living with my mom, and because my mom was so unstable and her illness was really bad, we ended up also living with her mom, my grandmother, who had a really bad and hard life. My grandmother's husband, who is my grandfather, served in the war in World War II and saw some really, really hard things. And he came back a completely different person. Super abusive, an alcoholic.
Was he like that before?
No.
Okay.
The war really did a number on him. So I say that to say I grew up in a very abusive home. There wasn't anything stable about my life. And we lived with my grandmother and my uncles. So she had 5 boys. 3 of them also were always in and out of living with my grandmother as well. And so there were a lot of people living with my grandma. And my 3 uncles were always in and out of prison for sexual abuse of a minor. So without going into detail, I was one of their victims. Sexually, physically, verbally, and emotionally. From the age of 2 until 10. My grandmother chose to turn a blind eye to it. She said I was lying when I confronted it and brought it up with my mom. Had social worker because of her mental illness. And so I had to basically recant everything I said and tell the court that I was lying. So I lived under that for a very long time. Wow. And my dad was in and out of the picture. Okay. Because My dad's illness is a lot more severe than my mom's. Medicine has never really ever been able to stabilize him. Mm-hmm. So he actually, as long as I've known him, has lived in and out of either group homes or the psych ward. And so we didn't really get to visit with him much in his living spaces just because it wasn't safe for kids, which is kind of ironic because our home life wasn't safe either.
Yeah.
But my mom really wanted us to have a relationship with him. But my dad was also sexually abusive towards me. Mm-hmm. I won't go into details or stories, but he was. And so I just thought it was normal. I thought it was normal that your father and your uncles did that. But the interesting thing in all of this is that my grandmother she's no longer living, was a devout and very strong Mormon. Yes.
Okay. So now some of this I didn't know.
Okay.
But you said you shared bits and pieces
So
about your testimony.
So so my grandmother was a devout Mormon. Mm-hmm. She was like a Sister Rose. She goes to Utah every year to do the genealogy because they're really big into that.
Okay.
And she took us to the Mormon church every Sunday. Okay. So I actually grew up going to church every Sunday, but I hated it. Hated it. And here's why I hated it. My grandmother lived one way on Sunday, and then Monday through Saturday was a completely different person. Like, completely different person.
Yeah.
And so I chose not to believe or do anything with what she had to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, so because I did go to the Mormon church this whole time, in the Mormon church, you actually do hear a lot of things that you would hear at the church that we used to go to together.
Yeah.
They do talk about Jesus. And they talk about God.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was aware of Jesus and aware of God, but had no relationship with him.
Yeah.
Or anything like that. But around the age of 10, I was badly beat by one of my uncles. To the point that my brother had to step in because of the fear of what was going to happen to me.
Yeah.
And I remember that evening when that all happened, my mom ended up calling the police and they took him away in handcuffs. And I'm probably going to cry.
It's okay. Take your time.
I went to my room and cried. Like, God, I don't know if you're real. Sorry, guys. I don't know if you're real. But I need help and I need rescued. This is hard. And I'm afraid I'm not going to live. And so I cried for 3 years from age 10 to 13. And at 13, one thing I forgot to add into this is my dad's dad is a believer, and his wife, strong believers. He was a chaplain. He was a Methodist preacher. They would take me for the summers because they knew that the abuse was happening, and so they would take me and keep me for the summers. Anyway, in that time like he was my saving grace.
Yeah.
Because they would take me for the summer and they would take me into the church and I would go to VBSs and I would go to these fun camps and I would hear some gospel truth. And he was the only male figure in my life who loved me, like really loved me.
Yeah.
And he ended up dying in that time frame of 10 to 13 of cancer. And that wrecked my world. Like it turned it upside down, because remember I was just saying a moment ago that around the age of 10 until 13, I would pray every night that God would save and rescue me.
Yeah.
And I felt like my grandpa was my saving grace. And then the Lord just took him from me. And so I went through a very dark period. Around about the age of 11 to 13. And when I say dark, I mean, I was involved in gangs. I did drugs. I drank. God, by his grace, protected me from sexual relationships. To this day, I'm still baffled by that. I mean, I was in pretty intense physical relationships with some dudes. One guy that I dated who I thought I was going to marry was the leader of the Spanish Cobras. I would knock over crosses at churches and spit on them because I was so angry at the Lord.
Yeah.
And I had so many whys, because at this point now I know, and I've heard the Bible stories and I've heard gospel truth of how God is in control of all things. And I'm like, okay, like if you're in control of all things, why have you not come and taken me out of this? You know?
Yeah.
So I had a lot of whys that I had to wrestle with from age 10 to 13.
Yeah.
What I didn't know what was happening, and we never know this, right?
Yeah.
As we're walking with the Lord, we don't always see the details of everything until we're far, far past it. And then we look back and we're like, oh, there you were, God, you were there this whole time.
Exactly.
But in the moment, you don't see it. And I think that's why it's always told to us to walk by faith and not by sight, right? To trust me. But also, the other thing I want to say to this as I continue and sharing my testimony is God was not happy with what was happening to me.
Yeah.
He wasn't pleased.
Yeah.
He was grieving and sickened by sin and the destruction of it and what it did to a person created in God's image. So that said, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And then at 13, when I turned 13, my mom's illness got real bad to the point where she ended up getting hospitalized. And so at that time, it was my brother and my two brothers and I were living alone. Like we had no adults.
Oh, wow.
My 15-year-old brother, myself, and then my 12-year-old brother were living at home. And then my grandmother, Dorothy, actually, who is a strong believer, and she's one of the reasons why I know who Christ is and why I've come to know Christ. And I'll share that as I talk about my conversion. This is the before Christ. She called me and said, hey, Grandma's coming into town. I would love to take you guys out for dinner and wanted to see if you want to come spend the weekend with me. And of course, I'm like, yes, because I love Grandma Dorothy. Like she is like very, very special to me. Well, she shows up to our house and sees no food in the fridge. She sees no laundry done. She sees a bathroom nasty destroyed. She sees maggots everywhere. She sees a wreck and calls the social worker. And then the social worker comes and realizes that my mom is in the psych ward and has been for several weeks and will not be getting out anytime soon. And so the state of Iowa actually had to remove my brothers and I from our home. And I was angry at God for that. because, which is ironic because I was praying like, Lord, rescue me from 10.
And then he does.
And then he does. And I'm like, why did you do this?
Do
but my why was, I kept like, why now?
Yeah.
Like, why not not when I was 10, like when, before all of the really bad stuff happened, like, so I questioned that from like age 13 to about age 16. I just fought and I questioned and I wondered and I was just like, what's going on here? And then, when I was 16 years old, it was Christmas Eve service, which is why the Christmas Eve service is very special to me. Yeah. My dad was preaching about Christ and about his life, death, and resurrection, and how his body was broken and crushed for our iniquities, and how he was on the cross and felt like the Lord felt alone and cried out, well, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then, so like my dad's preaching this, and as he's preaching this, I'm weeping in the back of the service, and I'm realizing like the Lord's not forsaken me. He is saving me is what he's doing. So I gave my life to Christ when I was 16. And then from there on, it was not a walk in the park. But I would say that the people who were very instrumental in helping me come to know the Lord was my grandmother, Dorothy. She prayed for me 24/7. And every time I was with her, she never stopped sharing the gospel with me and sharing hope with me. Yeah. And then the family that adopted me was actually did I say that part that I got adopted, or did I skip over that part?
No, I don't think you said
okay, so when I was 13, the state of Iowa removed me from the home, and my grandmother called my dad's brother, who is a Southern Baptist preacher. Hey, Cathy and Jerry and David can't go back home anymore. They need a place to stay. At the time, the state of Iowa would not let David leave Iowa, and my brother Jeremiah was old enough to decide what he wanted to do. And I was in the middle, and so they ended up adopting me and bringing me to Illinois. So I grew up in Des Moines, but at 13 I moved to Illinois.
Okay.
And so he my adopted dad, who's the Southern Baptist preacher, is the one who preached the Christmas Eve service.
And he is your
He's now who I call my dad. He's my uncle by blood.
Okay.
But I call him dad.
Okay. Got it.
He and his wife, my mom, they were instrumental in me coming to know Christ. So my grandma Dorothy, my uncle and aunt, who I call dad and mom, and then their children, and then even their church. Because the thing that was just like, what is even happening? These people took in a very broken and hurt teenage little girl and wrapped their arms around her, loved her, cried with her, wept with her, prayed with her. Some of them are like, let's go shopping and get school clothes for you, or let's go have like people. I'm like, this is new to me. I've never seen this in my life, And so the way that these people were the hands and feet of Jesus really changed my life. It really made me think like, wow, like these people really love this Jesus that they talk about. I want to know who this Jesus is. Like, I really want to know who this Jesus is. And then the other person who is super instrumental in me coming to know the Lord, I don't know if you've met her yet, but she's my best friend, Melody. She's
You've talked about her.
She was super instrumental in me coming to know the Lord as well. We went to the same junior high and high school, and you've
talked about Melody a lot.
So, she's special. She ended up kind of like putting her arm around me, and she befriended me, and her whole family loved me like I was one of their own, and really showed me Christ. And so there were a lot of people that God used as his instruments to help me come to know him. But it was the Christmas Eve service where the Lord's like, you're mine.
Yeah.
Like sealed, bought, and done, you know?
How old were you again, Cathy?
16.
16. Okay.
So
Wow.
I have many, many testimonies, and I will share when you ask a follow-up question of how God has used my story.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry that I choked up.
No, don't, girl. Don't apologize. I mean, I was choking up. So I have not heard, you've told me bits and pieces of your testimony, which, you know, I never wanted to pry because I knew in the past that you had said that it was, you lived a hard life. And until now, this is, I didn't realize what you meant by hard. So like, I'm still like, I love you, friend.
Oh, I love you too.
Just, wow. Just you sharing your testimony and what you've just been through has really, wow, you're going to get me choked up now. But it's just, you know, not our perspectives, but how we came to know Christ is just completely different. But it was always the same. And how God was instrumental in bringing us to him.
Yes.
Even though for you it was obviously just hard and difficult and you had to go through so much to get there. But your testimony has just really touched me in a way that like you went through so much of a difficult time that even through those difficult times when you were basically saying, why are you allowing me this, God? And I don't love you. Get away from me. I don't want to have anything to do with you. How God still brought you back to him. And I just think that is just a powerful testimony, Cathy. And I hope that our listeners were blessed with that, even though I know it was hard for you to get that out. And thank you for sharing that. But so we talked about your conversion. So tell me, after Christ, how has your relationship been after you became a Christian? Like, how's it been for you?
Yeah. So I'm 20 years knowing Christ.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm old. Jeez. Oh my
That's why I
gosh.
threw that out there. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
So one of the things that I wanted to touch on in this aspect of sharing my testimony is I'm sure you kept hearing me say a lot, why? Like, why now? Why did you allow this? If you were in control of all things, why didn't you stop this? You know, there was constant whys. But now that I'm on the other side, I have seen God use so many opportunities for me. Like, I'm actually currently not discipling. I'm counseling, mentoring 2 ladies right now who have very similar testimonies.
Cheers.
Who are younger than me. They're in their 20s and who are struggling different. They have different struggles, but I'm like, oh my gosh. That's why
I've been through this.
Like,
walk.
God, here's how God used this to heal me and to grow me and to change me and sanctify me. And now by God's grace, I get to use that to do the same and disciple and mentor these 2 women.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I've seen that. I've also had the opportunity to, there's been a couple of times where I've done evangelism with my dad. My dad, before he became a preacher, he was a collegiate evangelist who would travel throughout the state of Illinois, but also the Midwest, speaking in college campuses.
Okay.
And I would tag along with him if I could.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to get into some really good conversations with some women on college campuses that came from broken, hard places.
Wow.
And a few of them was like, I don't even think God can do anything with me. I'm so far beyond his reach. And I'm like, actually, you're not.
Oh my gosh.
So
that is awesome. I love hearing
God
that.
has he's redeemed that part of my life in the sense of I've been able to mentor and counsel and disciple women from similar backgrounds. I don't think I could have done that if I didn't walk that really hard road.
Yeah.
Now, that said, if I'm going to be honest, there are times where I did struggle after coming to Christ of, it would be so nice. It would have been so nice to have an easy testimony.
Yeah.
Because I still fight some of the struggles. Like this sexual abuse still affects me. In that, like, I mean, without going into detail, but it still affects my marriage in the sense of like, I struggle with like, it's just, it still affects me.
Yeah.
And I hate that it does. And I have to fight against it a lot. I also have to fight against a lot of self-condemnation of, you were so like the enemies, like you're not, Christ didn't love you. If Christ loved you, he wouldn't have done X, Y, like he would have done this. And so, you know, there's things like that I have to fight through and wrestle with and go to the scriptures and to fight through. Yeah. One of the things I told one of the ladies that I am mentoring is that one thing that I've learned in the past 5 years, and some of it was I ended up having to get biblical counseling to help me process a lot and put my past in its place. That's a reference to a book, but just to learn to forgive and to repent and to reconcile if possible. But one of the things that I learned in that whole process is I have to take what is true, what it is that I'm like dealing with or struggling with, and identify the truth, identify the lie, and replace it. Like, okay, or admit, okay, yes, I am a sinner who needs Jesus. Yeah. But the lie is, I'm not beyond his, like, the Lord is working in me and will always be working in me. Yeah. And then replacing a lot of the things with scripture. And so I find myself doing that a lot. And one of the scriptures that I didn't bring up when I was sharing my testimony, it's pretty much a life verse for me. It's in Acts 17. I believe it's 24 through 26, where the Lord is talking about he doesn't need, or the Lord is talking about God determines the allotted boundaries, meaning like the areas that you live, the times and the places. So he determines all of those things so that well, what's that there for? So that we would reach out and others would reach out and find him. And so one of the reasons why that's my life verse is because in the hard times, like I said, when I was 10, I went to my room and cried. I'm like, God, if you're real, save me. Yeah. I'm not sure I would have done that. You know what I'm saying? So all of my life, and I can look back now and see his hand there the whole time. Yeah. Like he put me there for a specific time, a specific purpose, so that I would come to know him more. Yeah. And each time I can look back. I mean, girl, I can sit here and like, here's one example. My, one of my best friends and I, when we were 12 years old, we went to church to get donuts because I grew up in a very poor home and we didn't have food. Yeah. So the church offered breakfast. So we would go to church for breakfast, but we didn't want to stay because we didn't like church. So we left. Well, this church was located out in the country, farm-ish. We left church early, and it still gives me chills to think about it to this day. We're walking on back country farm roads, okay? Yeah. And a truck pulls up, and a man gets out of his truck, and he says, "Girls, come here, please." So we walk over. He's an unmarked police car and not a dressed police officer. And he starts to pull out his police badge to say, hey, I need you to come with me. We're literally getting in this man's truck because he tells us he's a police officer. We're getting in this man's truck. And as my friend, her name is Amy, she's no longer living now, starts to shut the door, the youth pastor of that church pulls up right behind the truck and says, hey, Cathy, what are you doing? Come here. I thought you were going to go to youth group. And I was like, oh, Dan. And so I was so confused. And the guy in the truck freaked out. He said, girls, why don't you go with him? Got in the truck and drove off. I still am convinced to this day, if that youth pastor had not have been here, that was a man coming to look for girls walking on a country road. You know what I mean?
I have chills down my back.
So
you was telling that story.
That's like my whole life.
Wow,
like of
Cathy.
how like there are so many times where I should not be alive. And in that moment, God used somebody from the church to like snatch me out of it every time.
Wow.
So anyway, I still think I'm like, oh my gosh,
girl,
I was almost murdered.
I mean,
I think so. Anyway,
no.
After Christ, sorry, that wasn't like bunny trail. That was just to show after Christ. Where am I now? God sanctified me, girl.
Yeah.
I have moments. I've had seasons where I've struggled of healing and like the wounds coming back and me having to fight those and heal those. But I will say, one of God's best gifts to me and his kindness to me is my husband. I met Jason in high school. He grew up in a solid believing home. His parents loved the Lord. His mom taught the girls in our class about like just solid. I can go on and on.
So this was in Illinois?
Illinois.
Okay.
So I met him and I was kind of in my mind felt like a lost cause for men, for Christian men, because I'm dirty baggage is the way that I perceived myself. But
just
Jason,
Satan playing with your mind.
Yeah. Jason really liked me. And we started dating in high school, and I had never ever, minus my adopted dad and my brother, felt loved and cared for by another man in my life like him ever.
Yeah.
And even his family embraced me and loved me. And so Jason was a big part of healing for me and being able to trust good men who love Christ. So God used him in the first maybe decade of me walking with him, of growing and healing and trusting men again. And then I became a mom because we ended up getting married eventually, and then became a mom after a couple of years of marriage. And as I asked you, and I'll share it here so you don't have to ask me, God used and still using motherhood to grow and sanctify me. You've already said it, so I'm just going to say it again, and I don't have to go into detail, but man, motherhood has shown me that I need Jesus. Like,
there are days where you will call out to Jesus and go, Lord,
I am
get me
selfish. I am prideful. I want my own way. And my children are the same way. And so like,
it's many personalities of us.
So the Lord has used them certainly to sanctify me.
Yeah.
I will say, since becoming a mom, that my prayer life definitely increased more because one of my children has dealt with anaphylactic allergies for the first decade of his life, and it caused a lot of anxiety in me. And so I had to do a lot of walk by faith, not by sight, and trust the Lord. So, I am... now find myself really digging into the word. I love theology. I love studying theology. I love women's ministry. We've talked about that. That's why we're doing the podcast. We love being with other women. We love hearing other women's stories. I love teaching women. I love teaching kids too. Don't get me wrong, but I'm in a different season now where I just love being with other women and hearing their stories and teaching them.
I was truly blessed by your testimony. Like I said, I've only heard parts of her testimony because I remember you saying when you started sharing some of your testimony that you said that there was some difficult parts. So thank you for being open and willing to do that, because I know that was not easy.
Sure. I didn't think I was going to cry, but
no.
Anyway, it's fine.
Okay.
I cry every time.
We need to cry, ladies. It's okay.
Like you and I have actually started reading books together and starting doing little devotions.
Yeah, praying for each other. We've been, there's been days where we both struggle and we both text each other like, hey, I'm really struggling right now. Can you please pray for me in this area? Or, can you please pray for my child? So I have really appreciated that. And that's kind of why we are wanting to do this podcast, is because we know there's women out there that struggle on a daily basis being a mother. Because unfortunately society has this picture of what a mother should and shouldn't be. And unfortunately, even sometimes other people have a perception of how you should be. And we're going to struggle because we're human. We're going to sin. We're going to yell at our children, our husband. We're going to have seasons where we struggle, both you and I, in some of our podcasts that we're going to share with you guys, is that, we struggled with depression. So, we're wanting to do this podcast because we want to minister to other women.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to share our testimony and our different walks of life. So,
and that's why this episode is going to be like our launching episode. So if you're listening, we're launching it to you because we wanted you guys to know our story and our heart and our passion, in the hopes that you would be excited to hear what we have to share or say.
Yeah.
But if you have questions, please, in the comments below, ask.
Yeah.
I know that there might be some questions coming from this, actually, of why did I leave the Mormon faith and commit my life and join the Christian faith? I'm happy to have those discussions.
Yeah. And also, our podcast is to encourage other ladies, other mothers. Our thoughts and our beliefs, this is what we believe. I know we know people have opinions of what they think is right or wrong, and we're sharing our faith with you. We're sharing our heart with you. We're sharing our heart as mothers from different walks of life. So, we just say that as a caveat, hopefully you can take our pieces of nuggets and knowledge and our thoughts and our heart, and you'll be blessed by it, because we're blessed by doing this podcast.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I think that sums it up, don't you?
Yeah. Well, we're really excited to be doing this podcast, ladies.
Yes.
I mean, we will be talking about motherhood.
I think some ideas. We've got book reviews on the table. We've got motherhood, lots of motherhood.
Yeah.
We've got
baby years, toddler years.
Baby years, yeah. We've got marriage will probably be part of that. We're trying to maybe convince our husbands to join once.
I don't know. They keep rolling their eyes. And I'm not sure. Can we do that with 2 microphones?
We have 4, I think.
Oh. See, now your husband keeps saying, I don't know if we have enough microphones.
Well,
okay,
we'll
guys, y'all are going to have to put on here if you want to see our husbands on here. They're who love them. That's why we love them.
We'll maybe even talk about church, how we used to go to church together.
Yeah. We're still friends though.
We are still friends.
We literally live 5 minutes, not less
it's
than
like
5 minutes.
4 minutes,
yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Church life, mom life, wife life, books. I mean, it's pretty much going to be a bit of everything.
Yeah.
But we'll circle back to motherhood.
Yep.
So, yes.
All right, ladies.
We would love for you to listen and join in and ask questions.
All right, ladies.
All right. It's time to go.
Yeah, that's a wrap. And we'll see you in our next podcast.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.